Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. And we have our first spotlight session for today, a session that everyone has been waiting for, which is winning against all odds, the Indian unicorn boom. And let me take this opportunity to introduce spotlight speakers. Our first spotlight speaker is Mr. Arjun Mohan, who's the CEO India at Upgrad, Asia's higher ed tech major. Mr. Mohan started his career with the Think and Learn Private Limited, commonly known as Byju's, as a teacher and moved up the ranks into a leadership role. He ran most of the sales and marketing in the company's early years and was until recently running its international business. He held several leadership positions throughout his tenure, including Vice President Marketing and most recently Chief Business Officer. Prior to Byju's, Arjun drove sales and operations at Titan Industries and did his stints with Tata Motors, Tata Realty, and Infrastructure Limited, and Sir Dorabji Tata and Allied Trusts. He started his career as a Tata Administrative Services Manager after passing out from IIM Kozhikode with gold medal. We warmly welcome you, Mr. Arjun Mohan, sir. And our next spotlight speaker is Mr. Vipul Parekh, who is the co-founder, Chief Financial Officer, and Chief Marketing Officer of BigBasket at Tata Enterprise. Mr. Vipul Parekh is also an angel investor. Mr. Parekh is a veteran industry leader with considerable experience in the IT industry, retail, e-commerce, and internet space. Prior to BigBasket, Mr. Parekh was an investment director at People Capital Advisors Private Limited. He has also been the president of Trinetra Super Retail Limited, wherein he was heading the retail businesses for Tamil Nadu and Kerala, and was responsible for expansion into new formats and geographies. Mr. Parekh also co-founded FabMall India Private Limited, one of India's successful startups. Mr. Parekh started his professional journey with TVS Electronics Limited and later went on to work with Wipro Limited for over 5 years. We warmly welcome you, Mr. Vipul Parekh, sir.
Thank you.
And our next spotlight speaker will be Mr. Gajendra Jangid, who is the co-founder and CMO of Cars24, an online retailer for pre-owned automobiles in India, UAE, and Australia. Backed by marquee investors such as Sequoia Capital, DST, and SoftBank, Cars24 was last valued at $2 billion. Before Cars24, Gajendra Jangid was associated with Schlumberger in the US and India for 9 years. He is the go-to man at Cars24. We warmly welcome you, Mr. Gajendra Jangid, sir. And the moderator and chairperson for the session is Mr. Avinash Deepak, who is the Senior Vice President and Vertical Head for IT, ITES, and Startups at Airtel Business, Bharti Airtel Limited. Mr. Avinash heads this division, which is looking after IT and ITES and Startups for Airtel Business. He has been instrumental in shaping Airtel Business's several GTM initiatives for new products, besides deploying leading various sales transformation programs like strategic account planning, value-based selling, industry verticalization, etc. He was previously at BT India, where he set up and ran the strategic account management division. We warmly welcome you, Mr. Avinash Deepak, sir, and I would like to hand over the session to you, the spotlight session on winning against all odds, the Indian unicorn boom. Over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Rocky, for the wonderful introduction. And my fellow panelists, Arjun, Vipul, Gajendra, a very warm welcome to you to this session. For everyone, let me try and explain to you what we're going to talk today about and draw a little bit of context from there. So all of us know that India has been a thriving market, especially for young organizations to come up, thrive, and flourish. The startup ecosystem has been very strong in the last decade plus. Basically what the market is all about in terms of this country is it's very easy to do business out here. Cost to do business is easy. There is good amount of access to both customers as well as a flourish of vendors. The domestic market is basically large, very large, the second largest market today in the world. What has also happened in the last decade that the internet consumption of folks on internet has really burst open. Today we have almost 800 million internet users as far as this country is concerned, which makes it the second largest internet market. All this is creating a very conducive environment for the startup to basically experiment, drive new ideas, qualify them, and grow basis that. Of course, what is also helping, no doubts, is the recognition from the government that this is a space which needs to grow. And they have done their bit along with the academia, along with corporates, to basically foster and grow the space a little more. What we're going to talk about now is basically the sudden boom of unicorns in this country. While there were a lot of startups, about 20,000 startups do exist in India in various shapes and forms. We are seeing, we never really had those giant ones as China or as US had, the billion-dollar valued organizations, so to say, largely called as unicorns. Let me run you through some statistics. Last December, exactly a year back, in the last decade, India created 31 unicorns in the last decade, almost 9 years. In the year that we are in, by the time this year closes, that 31 number would have increased to 80. So this year itself, we have created 2.5 times more number of unicorns as we have created in the past decade. So there is a sudden boom, a sudden interest, on various parameters. Another thing which is coming about is we are seeing the rise of the technology startup, both deep tech startups which are specialized in technology and tech startups with leveraged technologies to basically drive a certain idea into the market. Yet another, trend that we are seeing is that 50% of the startups which have come up in this current year are coming up in the B2B space, which in India was largely quiet, as far as the participation of these startups are concerned. It is more of a B2C space per se. What we're going to do today is that with the esteemed panel members, I'm going to pose a few questions a little here and there, and we will try to understand what has been the journey of the unicorns per se, what are the challenges they face, what is the journey of these three specific unicorns as such, the experiences of these leaders and how we can draw from them. Some of the questions are based around that. All right. So what I'm going to do is let me start with no specific order per se, but let me start with Vipul. Vipul, am I audible?
Yes, you are. Absolutely.
Vipul, I want to start with you. In this panel, you are arguably the individual with the richest, I didn't want to say that,
no, that's fine.
Experience, having worked at Wipro Infotech in the 90s, having dabbled with the .com boom. What is your sense of the startup boom in this country? What are the messages which you would like to leave behind to young entrepreneurs who want to follow that journey?
Right. So this is thanks, Avinash. This is probably the best time to get started. I wish I was 10 years younger and I had started 10 years later, honestly. You can't ask for a better confluence of markets, economy, technology, all of which are, everything is at the right time, at the right moment, and there's lots of finance available to, just pursue any idea that you want. So you can't ask for a better time to do a startup. So therefore, if anybody has any dreams of doing a startup, please jump in. Please don't wait for any, good day or a good year or a good time in your life to get started. This is probably the best time. And it doesn't depend, and it doesn't matter what age group you belong to. There are examples like me, dinosaurs, there are examples who are much younger on the panel. And you'll find that everybody has been able to build something unique. So the opportunity is immense. So that's the first thing I would really like to tell you. Saying don't hesitate. These kind of, periods of time when you can really build great companies come very, very rarely. in the histories of nations, or in our lifetimes. So this is a good time, and this is probably this year, the last year, or the next 3 to 5 years are really going to be great times for anybody to get started. Having said that, there are 2-3 things that I would, particularly because there's a lot of excitement today, there's a lot of, let me say, ambitious goals being set. It's important to, when you're starting off, to remember 2-3 things. One, an overnight success takes about 10 years. And the reason for that is anything that you start today, Byju's started in 2010, right? Or probably even a little earlier as an idea. So it takes time to build a brand. It takes time for your ideas to take shape. It takes time for the business to really scale. We started in 2011, almost 10 years over now for BigBasket. So you have to make sure that you are in it for the long run. This is not I will get in today, and I hear of startup founders saying 2 years later, I want to become a unicorn. And if it happens, well and good. But I don't think you can build targets like that, which can lead to disappointment, which can also set you up for very unrealistic goals, and you're targeting the wrong things. Good businesses, solid businesses take time to build, and you have to stay at the till for the good part of a decade before you really see any kind of progress or you see any kind of brand or product being built. So that's number one. The second thing is that, when you start off, there is a significant lack of enthusiasm, both in yourself and in investors and other people. So most people that you see are going to say, I don't know whether this will work. You yourself will have a lot of doubts, saying, I don't know whether this is going to work. I don't know whether I can pull this off. And you will find people, all your friends, your investors that you meet, people you want any help from will say, might work, might not work. I don't know whether it's going anywhere. So be ready for it. This is very normal. Some of the most unsure entrepreneurs have built some of the greatest companies in the world. Right? So it's not necessary that you need to be one, completely devoted, passionate, jumping, breathing fire kind of entrepreneur on day one. As long as you have an idea and you stick with it, and you think you can build on it, it will work. Having said that, don't do anything stupid. Right? You can't suspend logic. You can't assume that suddenly the world will change because you believe it will change. Look for data to sort of make sure that your ideas or your plans that you have are valid and are likely to fructify. Look for early product market fit. What is product market fit? Are customers happy with the idea? Are customers happy with the service or product that you want to provide? What kind of customer feedback are you getting? Use that to iterate. And if you do this, you'll eventually find that there might be an idea that you started with. It didn't work. You did something else. Maybe that works. That doesn't work. Maybe a third idea or your fourth idea really comes and really hits the jackpot. There is no guarantee of knowing 100% with any business idea that will work day one. And to give you our own example, when we first started in the 99, we started with a horizontal e-commerce store. What Flipkart became or what Amazon is today. And this was way ahead of its time. This was dial-up days. Within 2 years, we realized that while we were the largest e-commerce store, there were no customers. But there were very few customers. This idea was not going to scale. So we actually shut the business and started a physical store company. Right? We started doing grocery stores, which are physical stores. And that had great reception. We built that business over the next 4 years, sold that business off. So therefore, our first idea was completely crap. We thought it would work. We did not have any takers in the market. But what our second version worked very well. And a third version, which worked even better, which was BigBasket. 10 years after we started the first, which was 99, in 2011, we went back to online grocery. And by that time, the market was ready. So you can imagine how wrong you can be when you get into businesses. And sometimes being very adaptable, flexible is very, very useful. We were off by 10, 12 years. And even in 2011, online grocery was actually very early. Most people I used to meet used to tell me, I don't know if anybody's going to buy groceries online in India. And this was in 2011. And we were selling groceries in 1999 online. So therefore, I think, sometimes you may sort of fall in love with your idea. It's important to be flexible, change your mindset. It's important to iterate. Your first idea may not work. Something else works. And I think eventually you'll find success. Staying the course, being committed to staying the course and being flexible eventually lead to success. That's all I had, Ganesh.
Thank you so much for that, Vipul. I think very nicely put that the time is now. There is no better time than now. And the whole idea is to have enthusiasm and believe in your story, no matter what the resistance. One should have patience, of course, qualifying your ideas, validating your ideas, especially with consumers in the market. And lastly, flexibility for ideas and what you need to do will eventually find success somewhere down the line. Very nicely put, drawing from experiences as such. Gajendra, I'm going to come to you. Similar question, but slightly towards the future. I just spoke about the sharp rise, in the unicorn space in India. We are growing at a rate which is far faster than the number of unicorns getting created in China. China is almost double of us, but the way we are going, 2 years down the line, 2.5 years down the line, we should be able to beat China in terms of number of unicorns. What, in your view, will sustain this as we move forward into this journey? Is this something which is sustainable, firstly? And what are the factors, in your view, that will continue to drive the formation of unicorns specifically and the startup ecosystem in general? Gajendra.
Yeah, thank you, Avinash, for having me here. I think the question what you are asking has a lot of interesting takes. Like to me and personally, the business for any kind of business or any kind of startup per se you are building, fundamentally you would always have to look for value creation first before valuation. Like Vipul rightly said, you have to look for the early product market fit and what business model what you are coming out with. Is it really adding value to customer lives or not? Are they really talking about post your services or goods what you're delivering? Is there any good spread of word of mouth? All of those things are a signal to your business whether you have hit the nail on the head or not. And the second most important thing after that is what is the road to unit economics, right? My advice to all the fellow entrepreneurs is that unit economics is something which you don't build at the later part of the journey. So you should have very clear line of sight, whether it's day 0 or day 1, but there should be very clear line of sight and full clarity on the head by when I will achieve that. Because that's what will make the business more sustainable, right? Without which valuation will go back and forth, up and down, and you may just have to shut down the business if those two things are not very well thought through. Now coming to your point, Avinash, is about valuation. And so many times we thought about valuation. So Cars24 is a 6 years old startup, right? Back in 2015 we started. And at that point of time, trust me, when we thought of that, what will happen to a startup 5 years from that point, in 2020 or 2025, of course, if becoming a unicorn was a kind of a milestone or kind of a dream come true at that point of time. Now after going through this tough journey of last 6 years, I come to realize that valuation is something you can never follow. Valuation will come on its own. Once you start chasing valuation, you are bound to go off on track. And we have gone off track many times, right? And it's not only sometimes it happens because of what you did something wrong. It can happen by any external market condition as well. Like the first one which we really hit the wall was demonetization, right? When it happened, everything shut down, and everything was pushed almost a year before for us. And then GST rollout, and there's so many external events can deter you. So if you are really chasing after valuation, those are the things which will really make you feel down. What I think continuously you should, if your business is self-sustainable, if your unit economics is strong, if your product market fit is good, the time will come. Now it can come in 2 years, it can come in 5 years, it can come in 10 years. That's something which I don't think so anyone can really predict. Now coming to the current context, right now I think what India is seeing right now is a blend of so many external conditions, external factors, beside what how in last a decade or so startup ecosystem have developed. And most of these unicorns what we are seeing right now, they've been in the business for anywhere from 3 years to 10 years. They are not just started last year or something like that. So all of us have been working really hard and really trying to disrupt in whichever category we are operating in. And I think that the post-COVID there's a fundamental shift has happened in how I would say VCs are looking at the next decade or so. The technology-led startup have reaped the benefit of it because adoption of internet and technology has just catapulted. This COVID event has catapulted us to the 5 years from now, and that has actually helped big time all of the startups to really ask for better valuation because this outlook is super strong. India is right now is raising ahead of China or already ahead of China in terms of how fast we are generating the top valued companies. And second, of course, the availability of capital. Your valuation will depend a lot upon availability of capital, and we are I would say sitting at the juncture where the availability of capital is not an issue. The outlook of next 5 years, 10 years has been super strong. The ecosystem of startup, which has been in I would say work in progress in last 10 years, and there's a strong reason to believe so. And everybody knows it's just not the one of an event they are witnessing. India has a very sound fundamental economy, is very strong. Post-COVID recovery has been a fantastic. We are being called as a one of the fastest growing country in the COVID world. So all of those positive sentiments are really helping the startups to get a better valuation. And I think I would not personally like to start when the valuations are good. I would like to start whenever. I think startup requires a lot of I would say not only passion but patience as well. And if you really want to jump in this wagon because there are better valuation out there, you lose the steam very soon whenever something goes down. So if you fundamentally, everyone needs to feel for the business what they are part of, the problem what they are solving, and like Vipul rightly said, be ready to be in the long haul, long run, like 10 years, 15 years. Business doesn't get built overnight. It really requires a lot of time, effort, and the patience to be there. So that would be my piece of advice and my current take on the current situation.
I think nicely put. Basically, what you're really saying is nothing better than hard work. Keep at it. Unit economics. Start with that. Keep it in your head as you move through your journey. And I really like this idea as to don't try and time valuation. Don't try and keep a goal of valuation. That's not the real idea. Chase that dream, which is more important. And of course, the India story, the internet economy, of course, we are at the heart of it as Airtel. We see what's really happening to the number of consumers as well as the consumption per user. It's absolutely, in the last 2 years' time, it's been absolutely something that we would not have ever, dreamt of. Devices costs going down, the pandemic, people sitting out of home and working, consumption moving to the house, and so on and so forth. We're seeing huge demand as far as both mobile as well as fiber-based broadband is concerned. Thank you so much for that, Gajendra. Yeah, the India story definitely is strong. On that, I'm going to come to you, Arjun. My view is that in the last few years, we have seen Indian startups, especially some of the unicorns, replicate an idea from the West very well. In fact, taken those ideas and really reformed them to something much better, much larger, much bigger. Upgrad Story is, I see Upgrad Story as an Indian concept, an Indian idea meant for the Indian economy, now which is expanding slowly across the globe. Can you throw some light on the uniqueness of your model, the uniqueness to India, and how your journey has been as far as this is concerned? Yeah.
Sure. First of all, thank you, Avinash, Airtel and ABB for having me here. And thanks for the question. To explain this, I'll have to go back a little bit in the history on how the founders of this organization planned it all out. So the fundamental idea was the people who started this, that's Mayank, Ronnie, Falgun, they felt that for a country like India, for the economy to grow at the level we want it to grow, we need more and more upskilled individuals. So the typical global standard is for a country like us, we should have around 70% gross enrollment ratio, or number of people in the working age going to colleges and doing their graduation, so they are upskilled. While that number in India is around 27% still. And this is even after private universities opening up, even after education getting so much of focus, so much of budget, both in state and central government. So one conclusion they came to is that the solution to India's problem of GR ratio is not about building more structures or more building for that matter, or more universities for that matter. The solution lies online. It's a fundamental idea of creating degrees, courses, upskilling material online, which will help an individual to learn while they are earning, to go out and do a course along with the job they are doing. So the fundamental problem statement they tried to solve was access, affordability, and quality. Can we give the best quality education online on your mobile phone to anyone in any part of this country? If you do that and you allow them to have that flexibility to do it alongside your job, they will be upskilled to solve India's problems of tomorrow. So which is the reason why the idea or the product or the startup was very unique, which was also the reason why it took, as Vipul and Gajendra also rightly mentioned, quite a lot of time to get the idea right. It took them 5 years to really conceptualize, iterate it, and become an overnight sensation, overnight success. It takes a really long time. So that is one reason why we were able to do it. What we realized over a period of time is this Indian problem, which we thought was uniquely Indian, which we tried to solve. We saw that this is true with a lot of countries, even in developed nations, because with every day, the technology or the knowledge a person should have is changing. I mean, COVID took most of our technology to cloud. How many cloud engineers do we need today when compared to what it was 2 years ago? Or how people are going online, the requirement for cybersecurity, the requirement for data science and ML engineers. So it is all about building that lifelong learning experience, which will help a person to stay ahead of the curve. So that is how our organization metamorphosed also, because when we saw that a lot of people are, even after doing a course once, they're coming back later saying that, I think the first course really helped, but now I'm seeing things changing again. How do I do the next one and keep myself ahead of it? So the concept which was Indian now is actually feeling like it's an everyone's problem, because the world around us is changing on a daily basis. And that's what we are today. So as a part of it, we expanded our reach and we are seeing good response across the world. I sincerely think that this business model, which we build in India for India, is relevant for the entire world.
Thank you so much for that, Arjun. I have a 17-year-old son, and he's appropriately confused what to do in life. And I spoke to him about your model yesterday. And he's already online trying to figure out some courses, some very interesting ones, which I will maybe talk to you offline.
Sure. Great.
Yeah. So congratulations. Something very meaningful is what you have created for the Indian society at large. Coming to an Indian idea, Vipul, I know that BigBasket again is an immensely Indian idea, and the huge, massive success, your leadership is a result of the customizations that you've been able to create to address such a diversified need in this country, right? The North versus the South, the vegetarians versus the non-vegetarians, and the different economic strata that we have. A little bit about how did you go about it, and how do you see this evolving? How has it helped the model of BigBasket?
So grocery is a very interesting business. Like you said, all of us eat. We eat different things in different parts of the country. Not all of it is different, but you always have about 10-20% different by region, by city. And so therefore, the product mix that you need to offer to customers is very different. The second thing, which actually introduces a lot of complexity, is what do you offer? Different stores are different sizes. When you go offline, you buy fruits and vegetables from a cart. You might buy your staples from a particular rice store. You may buy all your other this thing from a kirana or from a supermarket. You may buy beauty products somewhere else. So getting all of it together and delivering all of it together to customers becomes a huge challenge. So just to give you an idea, today we carry about 100,000 different products. And to give you an idea of what that means, a large supermarket or a large store would carry about 13 to 15,000 products. So roughly it's about 6x in scale in terms of the assortment that we carry. Now, when you carry those kind of products and that assortment size, it becomes very complex to manage. How do you make sure that you deliver the right products? How do you make sure that you deliver the right quality? How do you make sure that you deliver everything in time? So one of the fundamental challenges that BigBasket as a model faced was, what is the assortment size? Should we offer fresh fruits and vegetables or not? When we started in 2011, we started with fresh fruits and vegetables, saying that Indian customers think of F&V, as we call it, as part of the grocery basket, so it makes sense to offer it. It's an extremely challenging business because you're dealing with fresh produce. It has to come from farms. Today we deal with about 30,000 farmers across the length and breadth of the country. We buy directly from the farmers, and so for example, to give you an example, we buy onions in Nashik, we buy potatoes in Agra, we buy oranges in Nagpur, we buy apples in Simla, we would buy mangoes in season in Ratnagiri. Right? So all of this then gets put together, gets delivered to each of the distribution centers that we have in the cities across the country. And this entire network, working with farmers, buying from them, paying them, getting it to cleaning, processing, packaging, and then bringing it to our distribution centers and then to customers, happens in the shortest possible time. Today, our lead time from farm to a customer's home is probably between 24 to 36 hours. And therefore, to build that supply chain, to build that, and build the quality standards that you need to deliver, it's very hard to do. So we use a combination of tech, of people on the ground, of putting experts at each of the growing areas, of building very deep relationships with farmers to ensure that we could deliver the freshest products and get all of them in time to customers. Because unless it gets delivered in time, you also have, fresh products lose freshness, they go to waste, you end up, if you don't have the right quality, nobody will buy it, customers will just return it back to you. So that becomes very important. So one of the goals that we set for BigBasket very early on was that our customers should be extremely happy with the product quality that we deliver. And today we have probably the lowest return rates of any grocer in the world, lowest. And so one of the tenets that we built BigBasket on early on was we said we'll adopt global benchmarks. One, when we started, there were no Indian benchmarks. Now there are plenty. But very early on, we said we will make sure that we are the best in the world. So we benchmarked ourselves for timely delivery with Amazon. We benchmarked for assortment with something like Ocado, which was a large European grocer. We benchmarked in terms of returns with the best of fresh grocery sites or fresh produce sites anywhere in the world. And we adopted those benchmarks. We crossed all of them, I think, about 2005, 2015, 2016. It's a long time back. Today, we set the benchmarks in each of these areas. And I think that happens, and that's a testament not to the founding team, honestly. That's a testament to the kind of processes that we build, the kind of people that we have, the kind of expertise that lies in the country. And just amazing. So one of the things that I would really like to leave as a message is that you can build to global standards in India any time of the day. You can take on global competition and beat them hands down with the intelligence, with the creativity, and with the quality of people that we have. And I think that's really what BigBasket leveraged, using local supply chain technologies, building our entire technology is built from the ground up by Indian engineers, by a team of about 15 people who started this company. Right? So it's not that you require a large tech team to even deliver this. So building that entire supply chain was a different. Building making sure that you have logistics, delivering in time, making sure that every delivery is tracked, building customer service on top of it. We work with your business today, and we use your cloud platform for a lot of our customer service offerings. And setting benchmarks there becomes very important. So just to give you one simple example, because I think it serves an illustration to the amount of granularity and the depth that you need to go to when you look at customers, is we offer voice service. Right? We're the only customer e-commerce business which offers a voice service where if you have a problem, you pick up the phone and can dial. And customers love it, incidentally. Right? A lot of customers use that. It's very painful to operate. It's also very expensive to operate, right? Which is why most people don't do it. But we said it's very important that you do it. But the benchmark we set for a voice service, and ever since we had, we said any call that comes in from a customer has to be picked up in 3 rings. And we used to, as founders, monitor every week, saying how many calls got picked up in 3 rings and how many did not, and what caused that. Was it overload? Was it number of people not there? So I think the the purpose of giving this metric is more to illustrate that you need to design processes, you need to design, at great granularity and really keeping the customer in mind. And if you can do that, and that is what BigBasket has been able to do, to build processes which really reflect what customers want, and to design the organization on the basis of that.
I think I'm amazed at the amount of rich information, Vipul, you bring to the table in terms of the depth of understanding your supply chain, the mangoes and the various oranges, fruits, where do they come to, coupled with the extremely deep insight about demand, which is your consumer, who likes what, using technology to basically ensure an individual at the residence gets the right thing at the right time, all delivered within 36 hours. Amazing journey, no doubt about it. Yes, we do serve you. We have a great amount of pride in handling your customer engagement platform. The SMS platform helps you, what I understand from your teams, helps you engage. We have a platform called Airtel IQ, which is a little startup that we have running within our organization, doing tremendously well. And that platform helps you engage with consumers through SMS, through voice, through video, soon bots and WhatsApp. BigBasket consumers use that. Another thing that we do very interestingly for you is that we track some of your assets as they move in the country through our IoT platform. That's also something that we really do, which is very interesting. We learned a lot from that business case and have been able to replicate it. Great. Thank you so much for the patronage there. Arjun, I'm going to come to you on a slightly different topic per se. One of the things to drive the startup ecosystem, to drive the formation of the unicorns, is the support of the government, right? The government has been doing, as I see, their bit, quite a bit actually, in terms of Skill India, Make in India, the new PLI scheme for manufacturing, the Startup India platforms, accelerators that they've been able to create with organizations like institutes like IIT, and so on and so forth. There's also a lot of partnership happening with the corporates to foster this program. How do you see the government making a further impact to enhance, to drive digital learning in this country?
Sure. Again, Avinash, thank you so much for the question. So in my view, Government of India has been very, very proactive with supporting digital, especially digital education. As you rightly said, Skill India, lot of programs. But I would say the game changer has been the new education policy. India will be one of those few countries in the world which is now allowed to give formal education online. So you can do a bachelor's or a master education, be it a BBA, BCA, MBA, MCA, BA program online purely, sitting in your home on a good platform like Upgrad or one of the university platforms, even on your mobile. So that, in my view, is a very, very futuristic thought process, a very, very futuristic idea, something which government has taken, understanding what the people of this country is looking for. Just to give an example of the BigBasket delivery boys, there's so many of them who starts working immediately after their 12th standard. These are not people without aspiration, but they don't have time. Neither do they have a lot of money to take a break and go back to campuses. This is suddenly allowing them to be a graduate, suddenly allowing them to come to the next level of making a better living there. So in my view, government has been very proactive with the policies. Where the government can really help is the implementation of this to the last mile. I mean, it's easier said than done for us, but government is a behemoth. There's so many things which needs to happen. So it is always in the implementation that it takes time. There are, back and forth in it. It is slowly getting there. And I personally, I will be happiest if we start the government send out the message of truly making the digital education formally education by changing the GST of digital education. So even now, education is at a 0% or 5%, but the GST of digital education is still on the highest. So I would say that there's a lot of things happening in the right direction, but implementation of this is taking time, which is something we will all have to work closely with the government to take it to the next level. Because fundamentally, this is an idea whose time has come. And the faster we do it, the better we'll help this country.
Good perspective. Yeah, the government has been driving a few things. I've been personally working with both the state and the central government in various shapes and forms, and we see fair amount of intensity in terms of investing, advising, creating platforms, as I said earlier, for the startups to flourish. Thank you so much for that answer. Gajendra, I want to go to you for a question which is in my mind and maybe a little interesting for everybody. Buying a car, whether it is new or a used one, involved a lot of physicality. It's been quite some time since I bought my car, but I could not have imagined purchasing it online. I mean, there is a showroom to be visited. You speak to a sales guy, you touch the car, feel it, you check out the interior, smell it, you take it to the mechanic to check, besides a test drive, as to is everything okay, or not. There's so many papers that you have to go through, etc. How have you been? You've of course transformed this entirely. Miraculously, people are now buying a product like a car online, sitting out of their homes, right? And they're very delighted. Your business and the fact that your unicorn clearly establishes that the model is seeing demand, consumption, and appreciation from customers. How have you been able to sustain, replicate the same experience online as such? Can you throw some light on that, please?
Yeah, definitely, Avinash. I think that's a very fundamental and very important question. Sure, I'll be very quick and to the point. So Avinash, so if we just to addressing your question, like if we had asked ourselves, let's say 10 to 15 years ago, right, about everything what we are doing today when it comes to buying online, like people was talking about buying mangoes online or apples online, no mangoes coming from Kolhapur or apple coming from Himachal, right? So if we would have asked ourselves at that point of time, we said, how can I touch the fruit and make sure it is good quality, right? How can I smell it so that I know that it's good quality, and then only I will be able to buy it? How can I just buy anything online? And now fast forward 10, 15 years, it's like, everyone is doing it. There's so like, it's become a norm. It has become so common about us buying anything, grocery or everything, what we call it, which currently is very commonly perceived as anyone can buy online. So I think the sensitivity towards, especially about car, comes even more, Avinash, because it is a high ticket item, right? After house, car is the second most product at which you spend a lot of money on. So sensitivity towards buying is very important, like very critical when it comes to car. That's why, like you rightly said, touch and feel and ensuring everything is good with the car and it fits the family and everything. So there's a lot of questions, a lot of if and buts comes around it. But what we fundamentally felt that technology has a power to solve everything, just like how it has done the similar kind of advancement in the other categories. And what we felt is, how can we? Is the first question to ask ourselves: is it a better thing to do for the customer? Will customer really get value out of it? And when we realize that there is a strong value to be created if we start selling car online, and that value is justified to the customer in monetary terms as well, then this is the business to go for. And after doing a lot of homework and research, we found out it is the better way to go. And the one fundamental shift, if you want any consumer to make, especially with the high involvement category like car, where you would want to make sure everything is good quality, you double down on the quality. You double down on the quality, which means that customer can really blindly trust your brand and what you are selling, where they can be rest assured that whatever they are doing, they would get the best, best quality possible what they can get. So we doubled down on the quality as much as we could, and we use the technology at every junction. Meaning, car has got more than 1,000 moving parts, right? So, and when you are solving anything for scale, you need to make sure you are using the data to analyze where and what is which piece is giving you what kind of trouble, and how can you really eliminate that problem or eliminate that issue before really it gets listed to be sold to the customer. So we leveraged technology, data science, machine learning to eliminate all those potential quality problems which can happen with the car, which was essential for us to really take the entire category online. That's number one problem what we solved. And the second, which is again, which is beneficial to the e-commerce category is selection. I mean, as we talk about it, when it comes to a used car, the selection is very important. Every used car is a different car. You can buy, let's say any Honda City from any new car dealership of any color, whatever you want. But if you talk about in the used car category, you are very much limited by the choices which is available around you, which means maybe 50 or 100 cars or 200 cars is around you, but you would not be able to find the color of your choice within the prices what you're looking for, within the make or model or petrol or diesel, whatever the choices what you have. So there's always a trade-off. But when you replicate this business model in e-commerce, I don't need to open dealership at each and every city. Considering Maharashtra, I can really build a huge inventory in in a couple of cities and can really serve the entire Maharashtra with that inventory. So I have a huge selection, thousands of cars listed, which a customer would not be able to find anywhere in the offline world. So I think these are the two fundamental shifts which I think we did. Quality was enabler, where you can really trust blindly about buying a car, and the experience should be starkly different. That experience should be a tenfold different than what customer would find otherwise, because that's when the habit change will happen. So that's what we delivered, the quality and the selection. When the customer knows that you can buy online, you can really have an access to the cars. Not only you can see it online, but you don't have access to it, but access of thousands of cars, and the probability of finding that car of your dream when it becomes reality. I think these two added advantage, which are far different from how customer would find it in the real world, really help us transition the behavior of the customer to start buying car online. I think these two things I would like to talk about. I know my time is short, so I really rushed through it.
Yeah, I think very good perspective. Unique model, very well thought through. No wonder it is flourishing and really changing behavior of of this product category in terms of consumption. Gentlemen, Arjun, Gajendra, and Vipul, thank you so much. For me, it was a very engaging, very enriching, very insightful session. Really appreciate you taking the time and fending my questions. I'm going to hand over to you, Rakhi. Back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us for an interesting session on winning against all odds. It's definitely, that's what you all are doing, the Indian unicorns. So good luck to you. And thank you, Mr. Avinash Deepak sir, for moderating the session. And thank you, Mr. Arjun Mohan sir, Mr. Vipul Parekh sir, and Mr. Gajendra Jangid sir for joining us today for this session.